many trainers actively approach people on the floor, introduce themselves, and say, hey, I've seen you work out. I'd love to train you. Let's set up a session. I'd love to take you through a complimentary session. So we train our trainers to invite people to do things. Our leadership team, in addition to doing the normal boring office stuff, I make them do loops once an hour. So they're out on the floor and they'll start conversations. Be like, have you done a training session? Oh my gosh, let me set you up with a training session. I'd love for you to try that. Our front desk, our reception books complimentary training sessions because they're inviting. Because a lot of times, people hang out at the desk and they talk, and we train our staff heavily on building relationships. That's our first core value, is build real relationships. So they're building relationships. So the front desk is saying, have you done a session yet? Oh my gosh, I'm going to set you up with Nicole. You have got to do a personal training session. So the power of training your entire staff to consistently be inviting to people, and I don't mean inviting like welcoming, I mean literally inviting them to do stuff. It's huge.
You're listening to the Fitness Business Podcast. We'd like to thank this month's premier sponsor, OneFitStop, the complete fitness business software that is perfect for studios, gyms, and clubs. To find out more, go to onefitstop.com. Welcome to this week's show. I'm your host Chantal, and this week we welcome back Chris Stevenson to the show. Chris first joined us a few weeks ago on show 110 to chat about how to keep your members longer with high net promoter scores. And today he returns to discuss responding to member feedback and generating revenue from ancillary services. We will jump into that interview shortly, but first I wanted to share something with you. I was presenting at a fitness conference in Brisbane last week on success strategies of fitness business leaders. And one of the things that we spoke about were critical questions that every leader should ask. For those of you who are long-time listeners, you might recall these questions came from Susan Fowler, who appeared with us on show 76. But for anyone that hasn't yet heard that show, I thought I'd take the opportunity to share those questions with you, because revisiting them last week actually reminded me how important they are, and it motivated me to reintroduce them into my daily routine. And I think all of us can benefit from asking these questions to ourselves and to our team. So the three questions are: what choices did you make today? What did you do today that made you feel good because you contributed to someone else's well-being? And number three is: what did you learn today that will help you be better tomorrow? For more detail and information around all three of those questions, just jump over to fitnessbusinesspodcast.com and take a listen to show 76. You might recall last week that I mentioned the Idea World Summit was on in Las Vegas. I thought I'd take the opportunity to actually use question number 3 on this week's guest, Chris Stevenson. So I asked him the question, what did you learn today that will help you be better tomorrow? His answer, he said, was learnt from the keynote speaker, Darren Hardy. And Chris said this to me. His lesson was, forget about trying to be good at everything. Pick 2 or 3 things and be the best at those. I know for me that really resonates with me, because prior to working full-time on this show, I would always find myself saying yes to a range of different projects which would often distract me or would slow me down. But it's only when you are strict with yourself, when you can get comfortable with saying no and focus on becoming an expert in one specific area, that you really have the chance to move forward in achieving your goals. So thank you to Chris for sharing that with us, and maybe give it a try. Try implementing those questions this week and let me know how you go. As always, you can reach me on Chantal at fitnessbusinesspodcast.com or reach out to me on Facebook or Instagram at Fitness Business Podcast. Now, before we get into this week's main interview, I first wanted to share with you a preview of next week's interview with author Mark Schaefer. Mark recently released a book called Known, the handbook for building and unleashing your personal brand in the digital age. In the book, he goes into detail with formulas on how to build your brand, and next week we're going to explore some of those areas. But to give you just a little bit of a taste of what to expect, I asked Mark to define for us what it means to be known.
I do think that you can have a permanent and sustainable business advantage by being known in your field. And what I mean by being known is having the presence, the reputation, and the authority to help you achieve your goals, whatever they might be. Now, it might be running a business, it might be running a fitness club, or maybe someday you want to write a book about fitness or nutrition. Maybe you'd like to be a speaker about fitness or nutrition or fitness gear or your favorite fitness strategies. Well, today, to have those opportunities, you have to be known. Nobody's going to give you a book contract unless you have an audience to go with it. Same with speaking. Maybe you want to raise money for a charity. You're going to have an advantage if you're known. The people who are known, the doors will open. The calls will be returned. The opportunities will come versus the people who aren't known in their field.
Make sure you stay tuned a little later in the show to hear Mark's answers to the Precor Quickfire 5 questions. Now, we're about to transition into this week's interview with Chris Stevenson. But first of all, I want to thank our podcast partner, One Fit Stop, for all their support. I highly recommend that all fitness professionals go along to onefitstop.com to find out how their software can enable you to take control of day-to-day management in your fitness business. One Fit Stop's scheduling, client management, programming, and payment collection tools will set your business up for success. In 2003, Chris Stevenson opened Stevenson Fitness, a 2,000 square foot gym that specialised in private training. In 2010, they grew to a 7,500 square foot full service health club. And now in 2017, they help more than 2,000 members achieve their fitness goals. We start today's interview when I asked Chris to tell us about how they collect and respond to member data and feedback.
The NPS gets us data, right? And I had mentioned before too, there's a place for comments. So some people will just give you a number, but other people will tell you why in that little comment bar. So that's one way we collect data. Another way we'll do it is we'll do targeted surveys. So we have a weight loss program called Just Lose It. And at the end of that, we'll do a targeted survey. So we'll find out exactly about the program. Occasionally we'll just do an overall Group X survey or an overall personal training survey. So we are constantly gathering all of this data any way we can. But one way we do it in the moment is our suggestions and complaints system. And what we have is a binder up front, and it's divided into sections based on areas of the gym, Group X, facility improvement, all these different areas. But we train our staff on how to take suggestions and complaints. So we don't have an anonymous box, a suggestion box like old school. We want to engage with people. So if somebody says, hey, I wish you guys had X, and I'll say, hang on one sec. They'll go and they'll grab the suggestion book. And right in front of that person, eye to eye, they'll say, I want to know exactly what you were looking for. And the person says, this is actually a recent and true one, said, I wish you had the fat grips. So of course, the front, my person working reception is like, I have no idea what a fat grip is, but I'll trust you on this one. So, in the book, he's like, fat grips. And he's like, what are they for? And he said, oh, you put them around a bar so it forces you to grab wider, so it improves your grip strength when you push and you pull. And he's like, okay. So he took all the notes, wrote down the member's name, phone number, and email address, even though, we have that stuff in our system, but we want to make sure it's all current. Maybe numbers have changed, and then they'll initial that. So we do that for suggestions. We also do it for complaints. So when somebody, let's say they come out of let's say they came out of a really crowded class and just said, oh my gosh, you know what? That was just too hot today. Then they said, let me grab the suggestion book. By the way, it's a little play on words because somebody's getting ready to complain. You immediately throw out the word suggestion. So you're starting to diffuse that a little bit. And you come and say, now, and you get more dig for details. So you said it was really hot in there today. Have you noticed that before? Did it seem like it was just today? So they get as many details as possible. The job is not to problem solve. It's just to gather data information, make sure people are empathetic and they know that people have been heard right there in the moment. And then based on who runs whatever department the suggestion or the complaint falls into, that manager, that leader will reach out to that person. So again, you talk about engaging with members. Here's another way to engage. So in a situation with the fat grips, that was a fairly inexpensive product. We ordered some, and that was a fun email to send. Hey, we heard your suggestion about fat grips. It's a great idea. We've ordered a pair. They should be in next week. Enjoy. So you've got a very happy member. But in the case where we don't have room for a pool, we will never have a pool ever. First of all, half the people that own gyms that have pools would love to fill them with cement, but we will never have a pool. But for some reason, right? But people will look around and I don't know where they think we'd ever put it, but they're like, wish you had a pool. Now, obviously we can't do that, but even replying to that suggestion and complaint or replying to that suggestion, they know they're heard. Say, hey, we do appreciate it. And we'll give them options. We'll say there's a private high school down the street that rents out their pool that you can swim there. There's a local college. So it allows us to give them some suggestions and say, unfortunately, we're never going to have a pool, but here's some options for you. So with suggestions and complaints, people want to be heard. Sometimes you can make an immediate impact by giving them what they want. But even if you can't, people appreciate the fact. And it just creates another caring level of engagement with people. And then we do have here's a little secret we do. If it's not a suggestion or complaint, we call it playmaking. I'll give you a tangible example. Judy is one of our members. She's a little bit older, and she comes in every day and, of course, is in her routine and does the exact same thing every single time. And part of that is doing lateral dumbbell raises with 3 pounds. Well, one day, all the sets of 3-pound weights were being used, and she couldn't find it. Well, one of our trainers were there and said, let me see if I can find some for you. And eventually did, but it took a few minutes. But then our trainer, Aaron, came up and said, hey, Judy was looking for weights. It did take me a minute to get it. No big deal. But she wrote it in the book. So then we knew to order a couple extra pairs of 3-pound weights, and then reached out to Judy and said, we know you had a little issue and it took you a few extra minutes to find 3-pound weights the other day. Don't worry. We just added 3 more sets. So we call that playmaking, and it empowers our staff to go out there and feel good about making things happen and making people happy. So that's sort of our suggestion and complaint system, and it's been super effective. And again, then we've got that data. We've got the data from the Net Promoter Score. We've got data from the targeted surveys. We have all this data. Then when it comes to making real decisions, we can use real data to make those. Sometimes we think we know what members want. Why not let them tell us? Because when they tell us, we can give better. So with all this different data, we had a bar class and it was starting to trend down a little bit. We still had a group that liked it. But what we noticed in our surveys and our Net Promoter Score and our suggestions and complaints, a lot of people wanted Pilates. So what we did was we didn't want to totally eliminate the bar program, but we wanted to figure out a way to incorporate Pilates. So we literally created a format called Pie Bar. And it's not a place that you eat dessert and drink beer, although that might be a better place at the Pie Bar. But it's half Pilates and half bar. So literally based on everybody's feedback, we inserted, instead of bar, we now had Pie Bar classes, half Pilates, half bar, and the numbers instantly tripled. And now it's one of our largest classes. And we probably never would have come up with that if it weren't for reaching out and getting feedback. I mean, it was incredible.
While we're on the topic of feedback, a quick reminder that if you haven't yet read the book, Hug Your Haters by Jay Baer, then I have 2 actions for you. Action number 1 is go to fitnessbusinesspodcast.com and search for show 76, where I interviewed Jay. And then action number 2 is get your hands on a copy of his book. Hug Your Haters goes into detail on things like how to measure customer service, framework on answering private and public complaints. He talks about how to handle online trolls, and he also gives software recommendations for online and offline customer service, plus much, much more. Now let's get back to Chris. I do have another question for you, and that is, in your bio, you actually talk about the fact that 40% of the business revenue for Stevenson Fitness is generated from ancillary services. So I was wondering if you maybe could just briefly touch on what those services are and give us a little bit of an insight into how you market them or how you upsell your members to those services.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So, we have some smaller programs and some smaller things with ancillary revenue, but our 2 main are personal training and small group training. Those are that's like 98% of our 98% of the 40% is from those 2. But with those, it's getting people involved in the programming. So we do traditional marketing. So we've done direct mailers that target the small group and target the personal training. I would advise, direct mail still does work sometimes. Like we've had some pretty good returns on it. You just got to make sure that you're really focusing on the right areas and you're doing it. It's very critical that it's very strategic. So, figure out if it works for you, but let more of the traditional stuff, flyers in the club. We'll do little alerts on our app so people see that. Facebook ads have been good. Facebook Live has been great. And I lump Facebook into traditional marketing because I think nowadays it is traditional marketing. It's what everybody's doing, right? So there's all those traditional methods. And sometimes people will say that and kind of wave it off, but there's still some effect to that. You just have to be very strategic. So don't necessarily think that traditional marketing is dead, because it's not, but just be strategic with your choices. But what we found to be the most effective, that the biggest return, is what we do internally. So it starts when we have a prospect come in. So it's pre-framing them on a tour that eventually they're going to do this stuff. So when we're taking somebody on a tour and we're saying, hey, when you become a member, we're going to set you up with a personal training session because they're really going to help you get to your goal, when we'll already have discussed what that was. Or we've got this great small group training. I'm going to give you a small group training session, get you in one of the groups because that's going to really increase the time, decrease the time it takes to hit your goals. So we're pre-framing constantly, even with prospects. And then, of course, at the point of sale, we're always adding that into the solution. So people don't go to gyms to buy memberships. The reason people go into a gym and say, how much is a membership? Is because they don't know to come in and say, how can you help me lower my cholesterol? Or how can you help me get back to my high school weight? Or how can you make me have more energy and get stronger? They just walk in, they go, how much is a membership? So, you build rapport and you dig for the real reason they came in. And once you have that, we really recommend highly at the point of sale that, you came in because you wanted to train for a Spartan race. So we have a Spartan certified trainer. Let's get you set up with a membership and let's get you set up with a small group Spartan training class. So point of sale is a huge push. And then there's other things we do internally where we'll have, trainers set up a posture analysis or body fat testing station, and they'll do that, or do a featured trainer of the month, or have them do a workout of the week, those sort of things. But one key area that we found to be very successful in that sort of realm is getting trainers involved in group exercise. So what we'll do is during a group exercise class, we'll have a trainer go in and help correct form. So we'll introduce and say, our trainer Anthony's going to be here today, and he'll be walking around helping you guys with form, making sure everybody's doing something correctly. So the more you get trainers in front of people, the more you're able to sell personal training. The more you get small group trainers in front of people, the more they're able to get people in their small groups. So again, that group exercise is a huge captive audience. So you have the trainers in there assisting, or maybe you have them do the last 10 minutes of class, a good core routine. And we actually have a bunch of our trainers teach our boot camp classes as well. So we just, we pre-frame it in the tour. We try it at the point of sale. We set up all kinds of internal marketing. And then the last thing, and I think this is key, and it's funny because it sounds simple, but it's just not done enough. And we do it for many different things at our facility, but we create a culture of inviting people to do things. So we literally train our trainers to go out on the floor and build rapport and start conversations. And it's funny because it's going to sound simple, but if you're in this business, well, you're in this business if you're listening to the podcast, but if you run a training department or you're worried about your trainers, do your trainers actively approach people on the floor, introduce themselves and say, hey, I've seen you work out. I'd love to train you. Let's set up a session. I'd love to take you through a complimentary session. So we train our trainers to invite people to do things. Our leadership team, in addition to doing the normal boring office stuff, I make them do loops once an hour. So they're out on the floor and they'll start conversations. Be like, have you done a training session? Oh my gosh, let me set you up with a training session. I'd love for you to try that. Our front desk, our reception books complimentary training sessions because they're inviting. Because a lot of times, people hang out at the desk and they talk, and we train our staff heavily on building relationships. That's our first core value, is build real relationships. So they're building relationships. So the front desk is saying, have you done a session yet? Oh my gosh, I'm going to set you up, Nicole. You have got to do a personal training session. So the power of training your entire staff to consistently be inviting to people, and I don't mean inviting like welcoming, I mean literally inviting them to do stuff. It's huge. And not to go off on a tangent, but like group exercise. They build their classes by coming 5-10 minutes early, checking people in at the front desk, hanging out before class and saying, hey, I've never seen you in my Zumba class before. I'd love for you to come take it. So creating that inviting, that sort of inviting environment has been very, very powerful in growing our small groups and growing our personal training. And like I said, any excuse you can do to get people in front of trainers and small group trainers is great. And I will tell you, to kind of go back, I told you that when we see a drop in your use, we'll ping you and we'll say, hey, we miss you, where you been? Part of that too is it's our opportunity to say, you know what, let's do this. Let's get you set up with a complimentary session with a trainer to help get you back on track. So those we miss you emails let you know we care, we wish you were here, and also give us an opportunity to get you in a small group or with a trainer. And we'll do it, we'll do it with cancellations. When people come into, the unfortunate times when they come in to cancel, we'll say, what's your reason for cancel? Oh, I'm just not using. You know what? Why don't we do this? You still have your membership. It's still good for another month. Let me at least give you 2 complimentary training sessions and see if we can't get you. Because I know you want to get healthy. I know you want to exercise. Maybe that'll be what you need. So that's another way to get people into groups and let them experience it. And then if you've got great trainers, which I would think most people do, I know we do, and you have great small group programming and small group training, then it's all sold for you. You just got to get them in there. So that's sort of how we go about that.
They are such good examples, Chris. Thank you so much for sharing those. And I think it's a good reminder because quite often we set out with good intentions to do all those things that you're talking about. And we encourage our trainers to get out there on the floor and interact with members. But it's one of the things that sometimes just falls by the wayside. And I think your example of making sure that once per hour, people are going out and doing the loop. And I think when you get your team doing that consistently, then it means that the members become more used to it, and therefore you're not facing a brick wall. Because I know that a lot of trainers that I've worked with in the past get quite nervous about doing that because they're scared that, people are going to reject them or not want to speak to them. But if your members know that it's a trainer coming around to say, hey, how you doing? Perhaps offer them a session, then they're going to be a lot more receptive to hearing from that trainer and having that conversation than if it's only happening once a month or once every 6 months.
Of course. And I think two things to piggyback on that. One, I do it. So as the leader, I'm out there doing it. So again, you got to lead by example. If I told my trainers to do it, but I didn't do it, and my general manager and operation manager, they didn't do it, my trainers wouldn't do it. So we all go out there and we all do it and we lead by example. And then secondly, you coach up the technique. I would never say, hey, go ask those people to train with you. We coach it up. It's you build some rapport, you introduce yourself, you have a conversation, and then you work your way into, let's do a session. It's not simply like, hi, I'm Bob the trainer. I'd love for you to train with me. That's very off-putting. So we teach them how to go up and build rapport and the body language and start to build a relationship and how to segue into those questions to make it a much more pleasant process.
A big thanks to Chris for those great insights, and a reminder that if you missed part 1 of that interview, you can find it on the website. Just go to the search bar and type in Chris Stevenson. Got that out eventually. ABC Financial leads the health and fitness industry in software and payment processing solutions. If you want your business to thrive with the most advanced club management software, comprehensive payment processing, and customer service that is second to none, choose ABC Financial. Request a demo at www.abcfinancial.com. Now, before we head into this week's bonus interview, I have some exciting news to share with you all. Take a listen. I am so excited to welcome back to the show the owner of Bay Athletic Club and the founder of Team Rockstar Fit. It's Trina Gray. Welcome back, Trina.
Well, hi, Chantal. It's so great to chat with you.
Trina, you have just returned from Idea 2017. You got to tell us, what was your number one business takeaway from the event?
Chantal, what I found so interesting were so many of the presenters had a similar theme, which was be focused and be clear about your message. The more clear we are about who we want to work with, the more lives we will change. I took home from that I need to be more clear in my community that at my club, we help working parents reduce stress, find their health, and be a role model for their families. The more clear we are, the more lives we will change.
Well, you know what? As I mentioned to you just before, I've heard so much amazing feedback about Idea 2017. So if anyone out there missed out going this year, then make sure that you pop it in the diary for next year, because it sounds like definitely an event that you need to get along to. Now, I didn't only get you on here today to talk about Idea. You've also got some very exciting news to share with us all today.
Oh my goodness, Chantal, I do. I'm so excited. As you know, my business, which is Team Rockstar Fit, we support fitness professionals in many ways. We offer world-class mentoring. We hook them up with whole food nutrition, online coaching, and virtual workouts to help them grow their business smarter, get out of the trenches, and build some income while they sleep. And just like the Fitness Business Podcast, I too am passionate about helping people learn and grow in their careers. I feel like there is so much great synergy between our brands, and so I am thrilled to announce that Team Rockstar Fit will be the newest partner of the Fitness Business Podcast.
Yippee! That's awesome news. I am so excited about this, Trina. It has been such a pleasure having you involved in the show, first of all, as a guest quite recently, and now as a podcast partner. So welcome, officially welcome to the FBP family.
Well, thank you, Chantal. You know from us talking recently that I'm super excited about this opportunity. I love your brand. I love what you're doing to elevate this industry, and I'm so excited to be a part of it.
Well, Trina, that is hugely exciting news. Tribe, you're going to hear a lot more about Team Rockstar Fit in the month ahead. Trina, thank you so much for joining us and telling us that fantastic news.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
Get ready for this week's bonus segment, your extra injection of information, education, and inspiration to strengthen your fitness business.
This month's listener interview is with an Aussie personal trainer. It's with great pleasure that I welcome to the show Christy Thiesling. Hey, Christy.
Hi.
Now, you are the owner of Oh My Fit Body Personal Training out of Byron Bay in Australia. And I have to tell everyone how we met because it's such a cool story. In Philex earlier this year, which is the Australian Fitness Conference, I was literally walking from one building to another and came across Christy, who kind of grabbed me and said, I'm a listener of the show. It was awesome. It was such a great opportunity to meet you, Christy. How did you enjoy Philex?
I found Philex so unbelievably helpful and amazing and inspiring, which I think they were setting out to do. So they completely nailed it with me. It was my first Philex and I absolutely loved it.
Oh, that's brilliant. Well, you know, we're huge fans here of ongoing education and finding ways that we can learn from industry leaders. So I'm so thrilled to hear that feedback and it was a pleasure to meet you. And now you're on the show. So before we get started with your listener questions, do you want to tell us a little bit about your business, Oh My Fit Body?
Sure. So I base my business a little bit north of Byron Bay out of a gym at Brunswick Heads. I've been operating out of this gym for about 6 months. It's a wonderful community of people to service, and I'm very dedicated to helping people achieve their goals, both in body and in mind. I really enjoy the challenge of helping and guiding and leading people towards a healthier mindset for themselves. And it's been pretty fun and amazing and rewarding so far.
And you've got one of the most beautiful places in Australia to work out of. So that's a pretty nice spot to position yourself. Now, when we ran into each other the first time, you were mentioning to me that you really enjoyed the show. So what is it about the podcast that you most enjoy?
I really love the fact that I can plug in on my way to work or at night or doing the laundry or whatever it is I'm doing in the day and can have access to such amazing professional advice. Living in a regional area, sometimes it is a little tricky to access mentors, and I really do believe that with business and with life, it's important to surround yourself with positive role models, and I just absolutely appreciate the opportunity to hear and to gain that advice in such a friendly way.
And what have your favourite shows been so far?
Favourite shows? Definitely I quite enjoyed Petra Kolber back at, I think it was episode 53. I love her proactive approach to applying positive psychology in PT. I also love that the interview was quite dynamic. I love listening to Americans. Not sure why. I just love the way that it's very interesting to listen to. I also love listening to women that work in fitness that haven't followed the general molds and have broken through to success just by being themselves and ruthlessly following their purpose and drive. I really loved that in Petra's. I also love Sean Greeley, particularly part 2, which I think was back at episode 68. Again, that acknowledgement of emotional motivation in personal training. His script for Kim and the taste testers of sales style, I found that really useful and something I based my first sessions around, particularly around language to use around goals, being approachable to all types of client, and around language to use when speaking about money. Lastly, my third favourite would probably be number 99, which is Stu McLaren. Great practical advice in that methodical format that I can bring into my work day to day. The way he broke up the client into external problems, internals, solutions, and his examples of finding out the answers to those questions was really helpful for me in structuring a framework around my initial assessments with clients. And just that simplicity in explaining methods. So he said, for example, if it's something you can Google, it's an external problem. Also loved his why and the purpose-driven application of funds and levels of impact of change with his wife's charity. It was really lovely to hear about some of those more global citizenship style outputs of fitness and just bringing really good things into his world, basically.
Christy, thank you for going into so much detail around each of those. And I think that you've given everyone a really good insight if they missed any of those shows. You've given us a great kind of view into some of the really strong takeaways. And I have to agree with you in that Stu McLaren one. And that section at the end of that interview where we talked about the work that himself and his wife have done was kind of an unexpected addition to that interview. I didn't set out to necessarily talk about that charity, but it's so ingrained in what he does and why he does what he does that it was just natural progression. And I personally also found it inspirational and just was really nice to hear about someone who's so hugely successful, how they're actually giving back to help others. So thank you for reminding us of that example as well. And tell us, if you had your choice, who would you love us to interview in the future?
I would say I've listened to a good, solid, pretty much every one of your shows, Chantal. And one of the things that I always am a little bit hopeful for when that music starts in the first interview, you hear the interviewee's voice for the first time, always looking for something dynamic and interesting. And one person that I can think of that is definitely dynamic and interesting is Alani Storm. I first came across him at Filex in the Cycle Warrior workshop. And as a cycle instructor myself, because I also teach group fitness, I just found his style so different and so incredibly his own. I think he would be really interesting to interview. He's quite focused on the psychological needs of his group participants, and the way that he talks about that is really, really cool. So I think he would be wonderful to interview.
You know what? Alani has been around the group fitness scene for a long time now, and he's a bit of a legend for all of us group fitness instructors. I think that's a phenomenal idea, especially as you say, when it comes to talking around the psychology around group fitness. So I'll reach out to Alani and see if we can get him on the show. That's a fantastic suggestion, and it's been a while since we've talked to anyone from group fitness. So that's a really great idea. Thank you very much. Well, Christy, I want to say thank you for taking the time to come on the show. It made my day to hear all of those great takeaways that you've been able to get from our guests and to actually implement into your own business. So wishing you all the very, very best for the future of Oh My Fit Body, which is such a cool name, by the way. And thank you so much for joining us on the Fitness Business Podcast.
Thank you so much, Chantal. You made my day too.
Precore Quickfire 5.
Mark W. Schaefer is a globally recognized keynote speaker, educator, business consultant, and author who blogs at businessesgrow.com, one of the top marketing blogs of the world. His latest book is called Known, the handbook for building and unleashing your personal brand in the digital age. Mark, welcome to the Fitness Business Podcast.
I'm so delighted to be with you today. It's amazing.
Well, we feel very, very privileged to have you along. Are you ready for your pre-call Quickfire 5?
Sure. Go for it.
Tell everyone, why do you do what you do?
I do what I do because I am a teacher at my heart. I teach. I love having an impact on people, and everything I do gets back to teaching.
And what's the best piece of advice that you've ever received?
The best piece of advice I ever received was to not give advice. I had a very wise teacher one time, and he said, as a leader, your job is to not have all the right answers, it's to have the right questions.
That is a great piece of advice. Tell us, what's a personal habit that helps you become better at what you do?
The best thing is focus. I am a very, very busy person. I have lots of balls in the air, and that's an American term, maybe. I don't know. I don't know if everybody in the world.
We're okay with that.
They might have a weird picture in their mind right now. I just thought of that. I do want to be internationally sensitive, but. Look, I've got so many things going on, and I focus on 3 things that drive the revenue for my business. And if it's not one of those 3 things, I don't do it or I outsource it. So focus is critically important in this busy world.
Now, Mark, our next question is kind of funny because the question is, do you have one book, podcast, or blog that you'd recommend? And you have all three of those things. So do you want to tell us your most recent book, your podcast, and your blog name, and then tell us any others that you'd also recommend?
Sure. Well, my latest book is called Known, Building and Unleashing Your Personal Brand in the Digital Age, which I think we'll be talking a little bit about. I'm so excited about it. And my blog is called Grow. It can be found at businessesgrow.com. And basically, I write about the intersection between marketing, strategy, and humanity. So that's kind of my passion. And my podcast is called The Marketing Companion. I do it with my friend Tom Webster. We've been doing it for 4 years, and it's hilarious. I think it's probably the most entertaining business podcast out there. So check out The Marketing Companion.
Excellent. And tell us, are there any other books or podcasts or blogs that you would recommend that you really enjoy that you think might be great for our fitness owners and managers?
A resource that I never miss is a newsletter created by Scott Monty called The Full Monty. And Scott does a good job keeping people up to date with all the latest news on marketing trends. So if you don't have time to read everything that's coming at us with marketing and social media and digital, just subscribe to The Full Monty. I never miss it. I read every word of that every week, especially if I'm traveling, because it keeps me up to date on the latest trends.
Great recommendation. Okay, Mark, question number 5. Tell us, what will our listeners learn in next week's show?
Well, I think that today, developing your personal brand may be the only sustainable, permanent competitive advantage you can have. And in this show, we're going to learn the 4 steps that I found every person who's become known in their industry has followed, and how every person listening can do it.
Mark, I'm incredibly excited about next week's show. I cannot wait to share this. I've had the opportunity to I was going to say read, but to listen to Known on Audible. And I have been telling everyone about it through my Instagram and through our Facebook page. So I can't wait to get you on the show and to share that wonderful information with all of the listeners of the Fitness Business Podcast. Thank you to all of you for including the Fitness Business Podcast as part of your weekly professional development. I'd love you to share the show with your team. Just send them to fitnessbusinesspodcast.com. And don't forget, all the resources, links, and transcripts for today's show can also be found at fitnessbusinesspodcast.com. Thanks to all of our partners for their support, and a warm welcome to Team Rockstar Fit. And thanks to our foundation partner, Active Management. Head over to fitnessbusinesspodcast.com/active for a free business development ebook. That's everything for this week. I will see you next week. And remember, what you leave behind is not what's engraved in stone monuments, but what is woven into the lives of others.